Okay, man, let's get started. And welcome to Whole QB 360, new program. Guys, this first video here is going to take us through a bunch of the basic setup, um, defensive fronts, gaps, defensive techniques, all of it. So have your notebook out. This would be a good time to take some notes. First thing we're going to talk about is the basic setup. And what I mean by that is, what do we do when we first get on the board? The very first thing, how do you set the players up on the board? Okay, that's what we're talking about here. So let's take a look here. I'm going to move these guys around and show you how to do this. So first off, I think it's very advantageous for you to just always get into a 4-3 look. 4 down players, okay, put them in an even front. That means both guards are covered. We have our 3 linebackers, Sam, Mike, and Will, okay, and then we have our last line of defense, our 4 defensive backs. Okay, one of the key points to the basic setup is to always understand that there will always be 2 safeties in the game at a minimum. Could we do more? Sure. But for right now, we have 2 safeties in the game, a free safety and a strong safety. So if the tight end is the Y, then we would refer to this player as the strong safety. Now, you might be in a 4-4 situation, right? And you're looking at this from a 4-4 kind of a look. And a lot of you guys are seeing a lot of this style of defense, this setup. Same deal. The free safety is the guy in the middle of the field. The strong safety is the most outside linebacker, linebacker level to the tight end side. Okay, so but we're going to start off in the 4-3. I think that's the best way to go when you're first starting yourself off. You can put this up regardless of what the play is, what the formation is, whatever you're doing. You're a quarterback and you get on the board. This is the first thing you want to do. Put your players, your defensive players, in this position. Let's talk gaps for a second. Gaps are the spaces between the offensive linemen. So this would be the A gap here, the B gap, and the C gap, and that goes the same way in the other direction: A gap, B gap, and C gap. Okay. When we're talking about defensive fronts, when both guards are covered, we call that an even front. When both guards are uncovered, and you can see I put myself over the right tackle here, so my right guard and my left guard are uncovered, that is an odd front. So even and odd. Okay, both guards covered, even. Both guards uncovered, odd. Okay, let's go back to this situation here. Remember, our tight ends to the left, we're in a left formation. So if my defensive front is shifted over to the tight end side in a 1 technique, which is a shade of the center, and a 3 technique on the outside shoulder of the guard, to the tight end side, over to the tight end side, we call that an over front. All right, an over front. And I just use the terminology, we shifted over to the tight end side. That just means we're over, right? We're to the tight end side in a 1 and a 3. If we shift away from the tight end side on the left here in a 1 and a 3, that is an under front. So over is to the tight end, under is away from the tight end. And then if we ever get into a situation where, you know, we get this kind of a look where the guard, center, and guard are covered, that is a bare front. Okay, that is a bare front. And that's a blitz look. That's when, you know, they're loading up to do something and probably playing some man-to-man behind it. Okay, so we talked, this is a 4-3 set, you know, because I have 4 down guys and 3 linebackers. My linebackers are Sam, Mike, and Will. Okay, Sam, Mike, and Will. S, M, and W. Okay, so if, let's say we're down into a 4-4 look, right, how does that work? Well, we know that there's 2 safeties in the game, right? Here's 1 safety, my strong safety. Here's my other safety right there. So that makes this guy Sam, Mike, and Will. All right, Sam, Mike, and Will. It doesn't matter whether they actually play defensive back or linebacker. We're going to identify them by positioning of and counting players, right? So what do I mean by that? Like, if we were in this look and then right before the snap, this guy comes down into this position, he was playing a safety role, but he comes into the box. When he comes into the box, we still do our count the same way we always do. We look out here, here's 4 linebackers, who's the most outside linebacker to the tight end side? Boom. We call this guy the strong safety now, even though this player was playing strong safety before, but he drops in the box. We call him, he's the new Sam. He becomes the new Sam. This is the new Mike, and this is Will here. Okay, so that's how that would work. Let's take you back to the basic setup again, and let's go to 2 safeties here. Okay, so now we're in 2 safeties. We're in the 4-3. You might be asking yourself, well, what do I do when we have a 3-man front? So let's talk about a couple 3-man fronts here for a second. First off, we're going to go with an odd front. Remember, odd front means both guards are uncovered. We're going to pull one of those, the outside linebacker off. Okay, and there's our 3-4 look. Let's give you this from a 3D look, right? So there's our 3-4. Both guards are uncovered. We have 3 down guys. How do we talk about these linebackers? I think that's a real interesting thing in terms of nomenclature, because if you're talking about conventional coverages like standard zone coverages or standard man-to-man coverages, you're probably doing different nomenclature than if you're in matching split field coverage, right? So I'm going to give you the conventional first. And there are several ways to do this. I just happen to, going to show you a couple different ways here. So let's get to Telestrate here. And so first off, we have 3 down guys. Here's my 2 safeties. Here's 1 and 2, right? And the first way to do this is to call this Sam, Mike, Mo, all right, Mo and Will. Now, not everyone likes that. That was a popular with one of the teams that I was on, Sam, Mike, Mo, and Will. And essentially you have 2 middle linebackers, right? And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. That's just the way that we did it. Another way that seems to be trending, especially with a lot of split field coverage stuff, is to call the weak side drop player, the 4th rusher, okay, away from the tight end. He can either be called the buck, okay, the buck, or sometimes in other systems the drop, okay. So what they like to do with this kind of a player is he's always on the weak side. He's a guy that will come up and rush off the edge. He could put his hand down. He's more of a rush player, right? And sometimes he comes and sometimes he doesn't. But, the buck or the drop is the weak side. We'll call him outside linebacker that is a rush player. And he's almost always away from the tight end, all right? And we're just going to go with that. How does that work then? This is Sam, Mike, and Will. And when you get into split field coverage scenarios, this guy becomes a nickel player. And nickel just means a 5th defensive back. He becomes nickel Sam. Okay, so, in a standard setup, we have 4 defensive backs. When we get into split field coverage, we're going to get into a nickel, meaning this linebacker runs off the field, another strong safety, for lack of a better term, comes into the game, and now we have 5 defensive backs. 5 defensive backs means nickel, all right? That means nickel. Okay, so let's erase this. And so there's another way to do this too. Let's talk about the 33 stack. Now, some of you guys, are probably, playing in this, playing against this. Here's the 33 stack. Nothing really different about this. 33 stack almost always is referring to split field coverage. And we'll get into those coverages here in the weeks ahead. But what do you need to know? Well, from a split field coverage nomenclature situation here, we're really just talking about nickel Sam, right? And then here we talk about Mike, Will, and what do we call this guy? The buck, all right? The buck or the drop, all right? I'm giving you both names. Neither is correct, but that's how it'll be referred. So this guy does the same thing. A lot of times blitzing, always away from the nickel Sam, okay? So I'm going to back up out of this and talk briefly about a couple more items here. Let's move our players back to the basic setup. And again, I don't want you to get used to getting into an even front, all right? 4 down players, 3 linebackers, very simple, and then my 4 defensive backs. So if we take a look at that, that's the way it's going to look, you know, that way, right? And those guys will move around, but you can see they get 3 layers of defense, right? I've got my defensive linemen, big physical guys. I've got my linebackers who are, you know, middle of the road, size, speed, strength, and then we've got our really fast guys in coverage on the back end, right? And that's the basic setup here. Okay, so you know, as we're heading down the road into coverages and things like that, it's really important for you to understand one more aspect. And I know we're talking about processing here and how to process the defense and who these guys are and all that stuff. But the other thing I want to point out, and I could do it from this point of view, is how to play above the rim. And that's a term that I didn't learn until I was actually in professional football. And so the rim is an imaginary sheet of glass that sits on everybody's helmet. So if I get down to this level here where I become the quarterback, this is the rim right here. Like that's the rim. And when you're playing quarterback, the ball travels above that plane, okay? It travels above that plane. The only way that it can travel above that plane is when you're operating with a great elbow to ear relationship. Or we're going to talk a lot about elbow ear relationship, ways that you can develop elbow ear relationship. But I wanted to give you kind of your first introduction to the mechanics of throwing a football as well, playing above that rim. And, you know, there's an awful lot of stuff out there nowadays about, you know, more sidearm technique. And all I can tell you is you might be able to generate like more whipping action throwing sidearm, but you're not going to be able to play above the rim. And that's the most important thing, right? When your linemen are 6'4", 6'5", you know, they're bigger guys. When you're in that pocket, you've got to be able to operate above that plane.